Hello everybody, welcome to the episode 13 of Take It EV. 13. Welcome to the new episode. Thanks for tuning in everybody. It's really great to have you in here. In today's episode I'm going to be talking about the latest, greatest thing everyone's talking about, which is induction charging, wireless charging. I'll let you know what I think about it and, where I think it's going. But first of all, once again, thank you everybody for tuning in. Episode 13. Wow. Big number. Huge number. Huge. Welcome to 2020. The vision of EVs is just clear in this year. This is the year where everything's happening. Aren't you all excited?
This sucker's electrical, and I need a nuclear reaction to generate the 1.21 gigawatts of electricity.
1.21 gigawatts! 1.21 gigawatts!
Well, I do have an issue with punctuality, I have to admit.
So, since the dawn of civilization, by which I mean since about 80s, we have been obsessed as a sort of civilization of humanity with getting rid of the dangling bits, the wiry bits from our devices. It started with computers, obviously, phones as well. Pretty much most of our laptops these days, or most of our computers are laptops, for starters, but also most of our computers just use Wi-Fi. We no longer plug in. I still remember fiddling with the Ethernet cables in my younger age, but nowadays it's nobody really cares about that. I've been reading recently that in order for civilization to sort of move over to electric transportation, we need to shed the wires. I'm not gonna quote the Nissan CEO, who just ridiculously said that certain people are unable to or inconvenienced by plugging in, and that's why they're not going to push for pure EVs anymore. I'm just going to leave that out without a comment. It's ridiculous, obviously. But these days, we charge everything wirelessly. Who doesn't have a wireless charger for their phones? Even the Apple people, pretty much every single iPhone sold these days has a Qi charging capability, and I'm sure most people have access to a Qi charger or have a Qi charger at home, and that's why we've started hearing about the car charging more and more wirelessly. I charge my phone wirelessly. Why can't I just charge my car wirelessly? But what is the wireless charging? It's this all sounds great, but why and how does it work, and are there any issues with it? As you can imagine, it all sounds great, but there's downsides to everything. So this is all enabled by electromagnetic induction. So electromagnetic induction involves two pieces of wire, usually copper, wrapped up in a coil for efficiency. If you pass current or changing current through one of those wires, and the other wire has some sort of a receiver attached to it, a light bulb, anything that any resistance in the electric world, a wire will be the other wire will generate electricity, or electrical current will be induced in that wire. It's a fairly cool effect. It's used widely in the world. Probably the way you've downloaded this podcast today is over wireless technology. Works exactly the same way, except that in radio transmission you're obviously transmitting data or voice, and it's obviously much lower amount of energy that's been transmitted wirelessly, but it's exactly the same principle. So if you imagine one of those coils being underneath your car, it's very easy to imagine, another one being located in a piece of a road or a piece of tarmac. If you park your car so that one coil is close to the other one, all of a sudden you can transfer power over it. This is I'm simplifying it greatly, but this is generally how this works. So you may ask yourself, why hasn't this been done from the get-go? That's a very good question, and I will come back to it. So, most of these systems, the way they work, and they do exist, you can actually go and buy an induction system for your car. You'd have to install it underneath your car, obviously, and then in your garage or in your driveway, the other bits. The way these systems work is basically just they take the power from your outlet or from the grid, and you convert the usual 50-60 hertz frequency of the power in your outlet to very high frequency, and then send it through a coil. Obviously, this gets a bit more complicated because one thing has to talk to the other and has to let it know that this is how much power I have. Okay, but just it's a bit more complicated. But in principle, this is just electromagnetic induction. A lot of money has been poured into these technologies to enable car charging, and sort of as an extreme example, when I researched the latest, greatest technology, about 2 years ago, folks at Oak Ridge Laboratoire in the USA have demonstrated a system that can transmit up to 120 kilowatts of power. Just to give you an example, that's how much the previous version of Tesla supercharger could output. That's the maximum it could output. The new one obviously can do up to 250. This was over about a 6-inch gap, and they just basically plugged in a battery on one end that was charging, and on the other end the whole thing was plugged into the electrical grid. It sounds amazing, doesn't it? But again, this was done in a laboratory, in the sort of lab environment when everything was set up for this to work. And this was, over about 6 inches, which it's not. Your car is usually a bit higher than 6 inches off the ground. Depends obviously on the car. These systems have about 90% efficiency in the sort of the best case scenario. The efficiency of this depends on so many factors. I'm not going to go into it, but in theory, this would allow us to, if we had this installed in say parking spaces at our own house or in parking spaces on the council grounds. This would be ideal for people who don't have access to off-street parking. You could just park the car; it would charge overnight. This would be perfect when you drive on a very long distance drive, and imagine these things being installed in a motorway, and as you're driving along, your car is being topped up just by driving over the sort of charging lane. Sounds amazing. You stop at the traffic lights, and your car gets a boost whilst you're sitting there waiting for the lights to change. Amazing again. This all sounds very very cool, and I think recently UK government has announced that they're gonna give about £40 million towards researching this, which, to be fair, actually doesn't seem like a lot of money for something that is supposed to solve an EV charging problem. So let's ask ourselves a question: is plugging in really a problem? Do we actually need to go through all this effort to solve, this seemingly simple problem? Somebody has to lift up a cable and plug it in. We've been doing this, we've been plugging things in for at least 50 years. When you buy any piece of equipment and you bring it home, you will plug it in. There isn't a widely available solution for your house that would allow you to bring in your television set, put it in the living room, and wirelessly transmit the power to it. So if we didn't need that for our appliances in our house, why is it so important, or why do we need this for electric cars? It's a good question.
This is it. This is the answer.
So obviously the most obvious answer is the people who don't have access to their dedicated spaces. If you park on the road, if you don't have your off-street parking, you don't have a garage, you would love to be able to just, park your car and it will charge. And to be fair, I'm all up for it, but there are a number of technical reasons why I think this is far more complicated than just being able to plug in. For the induction charging to actually work very well, the two coils have to be aligned very well. Like if you take your phone, if you do have a Qi charging phone, try placing it on a mat to charge, and then just slightly move it to a side by about half an inch. It will either stop charging or it will constantly trigger on and off charging. It might heat up in the back, and the amount of power that your phone needs to charge is minuscule compared to the batteries in your car. So obviously that's a problem. I'm not so sure about driving on the road and charging at the same time. There are other problems with that, because when you're transmitting the power, it might be fine, but you've got the problem of alignment again, because you're gonna have to drive, on the line for the coils to be aligned perfectly. Recently Apple, 2 years ago, I think Apple has announced I can't remember the name of the product. Doesn't matter. The mat that you're supposed to be able to place your phone anywhere on that mat, and along with your watch and your AirPods, and they'll all kind of magically charge at the same time. What was happening is that underneath that there would be multiple coils that overlapped, and the mat would know where to direct the power in order for your device to charge. However, one of the reasons, obviously, we'll never find out because it's not a public information, but everyone sort of suspects that the reason why this has not happened is due to overheating and efficiency issues with that product. And again, we're talking about milliamps in there, like milliwatts. It's not enough power to cause any issues, but if a company like Apple is afraid of people's phones overheating, they're not going to obviously sell that product. Again, imagine that in on your street. I think that's probably as or more dangerous than having cables around in the street. There's been a lot of negativity from this couple of people on Twitter who are usually very, very negative about other companies doing things, about the because the on-street parking charging has been solved by some of the councils by enabling the outlets in existing bits of kit that are on the street already, being that a bollard or your lamp, right? It's not very hard to put a plug in there and allowing people to charge. I think that's actually a very smart solution. However, that obviously creates some controversy. We would love to have something that's better, but I think there's still a long way to go before we see induction charging take over. The issue number one is the fact that you have to be aligned very well with the two sort of sides of things have to be aligned very well. If you just walk through your neighborhood and have a look how people are parking their cars, you'll seldom see people parking precisely within the limits of the box that they're supposed to park in. All cars are kind of squonky, either one way or the other. Everyone has their own different style, and nobody, apart from a few really, really extreme examples, nobody's really into that parking their car very precisely. So that's a problem number one. Problem number two is the fact that, like I mentioned, the distance between the car and the two coils matters as well. This is there's this thing in physics called inverse square law, which I know, but it basically states that the physical quantity or intensity is inversely proportional to the square of the distance. And in like completely layman terms, it basically means that you double the distance, you quadruple the loss. So this works for sound, this works for light, and this works for electromagnetic field. So, when you're a meter away from your light source, you receive 4 times less light than if you were right next to it. If you move 2 meters away from that light, you'll have 4 times more loss of light, and so on and so forth. This obviously isn't something that we think about, but because we seem to like the human perception is that everything's proportional. So you double the distance, it doubles the loss, but that's not the case. So if you imagine kilowatts of power being transmitted between the car and the pavement or the coil in the road, if your car is slightly off, if your car is taller, if your suspension is slightly higher, if you're just parked on the curb and the curb is slightly higher, there's variance, and that will introduce massive amounts of losses in the power transmission. That's not something we want to talk about or think about, but that's just the way it is. So, I personally think that this is still far away, and obviously, ideally, what you want to do is basically being able to park your car and the 2 coils kind of magically align themselves, and maybe something sticks out from underneath the road and attaches to the car. But at that point, why not just have a piece of wire that you plug it in? It's cheaper, it's simpler, and we already have the solution for that. So it might actually turn out that, in my opinion, induction charging will be useful, but it might be something that's very extreme as a solution, and it will require a lot of effort for this to work very well. Useful, and of course, at the end of the day, with the battery sizes, improving and the battery cost improving greatly, we might hit the point soon where you're not going to have to plug it in every day. We've started with the EVs being these sort of things that you plug in overnight every day, and every day you just leave your house with the full tank. But we might not need that. We obviously will have to rethink the way we travel at some point. These days, whenever somebody new to EVs thinks about, okay, well, I want to look into the electric car, they always think about, okay, well, I need to replace what I have now, the way I think about driving now, with the same thing but electric. But that's not how things work. Your landline at home isn't exactly the same as your mobile phone. There's certain things you've lost, audio quality for once, compared to to your mobile phone. And we're talking about mobile phones as they were when they were introduced. The fact that you can't just you can't take your mobile phone everywhere. There will be areas where your mobile phone will not work. So it's not an exact replacement in terms of the functionality. We've learned and we've gained so much more by using something like a mobile phone, and I think it will be the same thing for electric cars. The things will change, that we will look at the new challenges, but we also adopt and love all the new benefits of having electric cars. Yeah. Anyway, there's a separate episode for probably that. I can't remember which one, but we talked about these things before. Let's go back to induction charging. So if you imagine, areas where there's a lot of contaminants in the air or on the surface, like it's snowing, that also, causes an issue. The plugs, obviously, another sort of benefit of induction or potential application is we might want to have a car that does not have anything exposed, any sort of metal bits, any plugs, any sockets exposed on the outside, and instead of plugging it in, we might just have another piece of cable that's or a coil that basically is magnetically attached to a bit of bonnet or wing on the car, and using magnets, the 2 coils will be perfectly aligned and charged that way. Who knows? Maybe that's the solution. I don't think 40 million quid that the UK government is throwing at this will be enough, to be fair. But then I think this problem will be solved by private companies. But we're going to end this episode with this sort of wild speculation. I'm excited about it, but at the same time, knowing enough about physics and the potential issues with these sort of solutions, I think induction is not the solution that solves our problems. It solves another set of problems that that exist, where the cabling is not the most ideal way of doing things. However, I don't think it's the solution for residential parking and charging. I think having a cable is still by far the simplest solution. But as always, let me know what you think. Follow us on the Twitters at TakeItEV, TakeItEV, Facebook.com/TakeItEV, Patreon.com/TakeItEV. Thank you for listening. Give us your thoughts. Maybe I've missed something. I probably have. Send us your questions, and I hope Phil will be back next time to talk about other optimistic and great things that we're expecting in the year 2020 and beyond. It's all very exciting and it's all happening apparently. So stay tuned and speak to you later. Bye bye.
Take it easy.
The following was a presentation of Take It Easy podcast. All rights reserved. This podcast contains our own opinions. Hosts and guests make no guarantee to the accuracy, relevancy, completeness and suitability of the information provided. All information provided on as-is basis. No refunds.